I'm Ethan Moore.
And I'm Pastor Dwayne Black.
And we're a couple of Jesus fans here.
Yep, we are. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, too. It's been over a month, at least.
Absolutely, it has been.
It's been a while.
You've been on tour, and
we've both been traveling a lot, so we haven't had a chance to update you, our loyal Jesus Christ That's Funny listeners, with new episodes. And it's a shame because we've had a lot going on in the world. And
we have. Yeah.
There would have been a lot to comment on.
There still is a lot. Yeah.
You mentioned you had a few things you wanted to talk about. I have a few as well.
Well, why don't you start out?
Okay. Well, we can jump right into it if you want. So what's going on? Well, so one of the things I was doing is I was traveling, and I went to Chicago.
Yep.
Which is a great city. I'd never been there before.
Did you eat one of those hot dogs?
What are those?
The Chicago hot dogs.
Is that the one with no ketchup?
Oh, absolutely.
Or lots of ketchup, no mustard?
Once you're over 6 years old, you're never supposed to put ketchup anywhere near a hot dog.
That's what it is. Okay. Yeah. It was. I had one that was like something Red Hots.
Yeah.
It was good.
They're great, aren't they?
I ate. You know what? I went to Chicago, and I was really hoping I would see like some big fat white guys with a little mustache, or with a big bushy mustache. Eating like unhealthy food, and I was not disappointed, Pastor.
No.
There were so many. I went into one of those hot dog places, and it was just like four of those guys, all sitting there chowing down, each at their own individual table.
And they open those places up early in the morning. I've been
Really?
there and seen people for breakfast eating hot dogs.
Breakfast hot dogs. I don't know. I go in whenever I go to New York or Chicago or a new city, and they're sort of have particular types of food like that.
Yeah.
I go up to the counter and I'm like, I've never been here before. What should I get? Like what's the thing that you would get if you want to have a singular experience? I don't use the word singular because you're like, get out of here, you queer, effete intellectual. But I'm like, what does everyone else get, or what's your most popular thing?
Yeah.
And then I'm in their hands. It's great. I get to like experience something.
And so they recommend like things like the Chicago hot dog with the hot peppers and
with the peppers,
really green relish.
Yes. Yeah, with relish and no ketchup.
Right. No, they'll throw you out of places. Absolutely throw you out of places if you want ketchup. Even ask for it.
It's like insulting Mayor Daley. Something. I don't know. That's the only Chicago reference I can think of.
So did you have a good time?
I did. I had a fantastic time, in no small part thanks to the hospitality of your sister, Allison.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And her husband, Jim, and they were great. I went there for a podcasting conference, actually, the Podcast Movement Conference, which is the largest podcast conference in the world, and it was like a big event. And Kevin Smith, I guess a lot of people know who he is, right? He did all his movies in the 90s and stuff, and he's a big podcaster now. He was the keynote speaker, and there was lots of there was just a lot of industry people there in this industry that doesn't really exist yet, which kind of makes it weird.
Yeah,
right?
it really. Yeah.
So there's some radio people there, and there were a few people working for sort of these bigger podcast kind of networks and things like that. But even those are small. There's still just not that much to podcasting yet in terms of no one's figured out how to make. How to figure out how to have gatekeepers,
right?
I guess,
Yeah.
So it's there's not an NBC of podcasting or a CBS radio. There's nothing really on that level. So it's all just it's iTunes, but then even within iTunes, it's there's no standard there. We're in iTunes.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in iTunes. There's no standard.
Wait, hey.
So I came away with some takeaways, which I can talk about.
Yeah,
but,
please do. I want to know about that.
Yeah, and I'll tell you more about my stay with your sister. So. It was she was so great. But no, one of the things was they told us that we need to set up what's been going on in the podcast.
Okay.
So new listeners, if they're just joining in, sort of, a 7-word bio kind of thing.
Good
this
idea.
is this is what I'm all about. This is what you're all about.
Right.
You want to try that?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. How about this? So I'm Ethan Moore, current stand-up comic. Recovering drug addict.
Okay.
And jerk. No, I don't know. A podcaster.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, podcaster. Yeah.
Well, I'm Dwayne Black, the pastor of the Sanctuary Church, which is an open and inclusive church that believes strongly in a lot of the recovery movements that are going on around.
Too many words.
Sorry. Okay.
No, that was good. That was good. It was succinct still. Okay. Yeah. So we both have that recovery connection, I guess, in terms of just being supportive of that community.
Yeah. I knew nothing about it until I got here, and just am amazed at it. So I think it's some good stuff going on.
Yeah. You once said that you thought that the people in AA were doing better Christianity than the Christians in the church.
There are times I look into the rooms and I think that's what church is supposed to look like, and we got it wrong here, because I really do. I think what they do and how they take care of each other.
Less communion wine though.
Yeah, well, they don't. Yeah, they do grape juice too. Coffee.
Do you guys do wine here or grape juice?
We do grape juice because we don't want to.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't have communion wine?
No.
Is that a Presbyterian thing?
Pretty much, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But I went to a Presbyterian Educators Conference, and I'm not kidding you. They said we have Merlot in the corner, and we have
nice.
we have Syrah over here,
right.
And then we have grape juice over here, and we have wine, some other kind of thing over here. And it really was, and everybody went towards the alcoholic stuff.
Yeah, you got to get those, let's grease the wheels of theology here, right?
I thought it was amazing. I thought, well, that's pretty interesting.
So nice bio.
Thanks. Good.
Yeah, we'll try to do a better job of that.
Yeah.
Those of you who are listening here, we know we will try to, the idea here is that the number of people who are listening is just a fraction of the potential listeners.
Right.
So we should have new people joining all the time, and we want to make them feel welcome.
Right.
So we don't want to be like, oh, hey, you're in the middle of a conversation that you have no idea.
Right. Exactly.
What it's all about, right?
Yeah.
So it's more like, welcome to this conversation. Here's what you need to know to participate, and here we go from there.
That's good. Yeah, that's good.
So we'll try to do a little bit more of that at the top of each episode, I think. And then the other thing that there were so many things at this conference I could talk about, but the other thing I want to keep it brief. And the other thing, if I had to pick one, would just be the importance of engaging with your listeners, and so if someone writes us an email, we will read it on the air.
Right.
So I want to remind people of our email address, which is jesuschristthat'sfunny@gmail.com. Send us a communique, and we will have that be a two-way street. We'll read it on the air, and we can go back and forth. We've been doing that on my other podcast, Sex on Kava, recently too. So that's fun. And connected to that idea also is the importance of actually getting you to do something for us if you are a listener, which is writing us reviews.
Right, that's
on
really
iTunes.
important. Yeah,
so critical, because apparently that is kind of what makes the difference between a podcast with thousands of listeners and just a couple hundred listeners, which is kind of we're in that latter category right now. But if you start, if you go on iTunes, which you have to go into the podcast app on your phone, and you search our podcasts, Jesus Christ, That's Funny, and then click the icon there, then it'll come up and you can subscribe. So please do that. But also you can click, there's a tab there that says reviews. And if you click reviews, then reviews and ratings, and you can click that, and then you can give us a rating from 0 to 5 stars.
We'd like the 5. I think that's what we're asking. If you
we can only guarantee your entrance into heaven.
That's right.
If you give us all 5. So we make no promises otherwise. So we do need you to give all 5. And then also you have to write something. So you put in your nickname. You have to put in your iTunes password, and then you put in a nickname, and then you write a brief review. You don't really have to put much in there. You could just say great podcast. That's a fine review. But if you want to give us some details about why you like it, we'd love to hear that too. And if you want us to give you a shout out, you can even put that and say like, hey, love the podcast. It would be great if you could give me a shout out, and we'll be happy to do that too. We might even just start doing it even if you don't. Just so we can engage with you a little bit more. So we have something to talk about. As if we would run out of things to talk about.
I don't think we would.
No. So those are two things. And so I'm at this conference, and the first 2 days I stayed in Chinatown because I had to stay in an Airbnb. Because your sister was not free those first couple of days. She was out of town. Yeah. But the second 2 days, I got to stay with Allison and Jim, and they were so nice. It was the best thing.
Did they take you around and show you the town?
The first night I got in, they took me to an improv show at the Annoyance Theater.
Jim used to be the manager there, yeah.
Yeah, and it was Susan Messing's show, and she was amazing. It's called Messing with a Friend, and it's just an hour of her and one other improviser. And they just go and do from one suggestion, let's go and do this amazing, funny show.
Isn't that great?
Oh, so great. So like, yeah, they got us in, it was all free because they know everybody, and we got to meet some of their friends. And then, of course, now I'm doing improv at the Villain Theater in Miami.
Is it really, where is that?
That's in El Portal.
Okay.
But they're actually moving shortly to, they're going to be moving to, I believe, like near Churchill's, like Little Haiti.
Okay,
more.
yeah.
So anyway, it's down in that northern part of Miami. And that's a really cool theater, and it was started by Peter Muir and Jeff Quintana, and Jeff right now is in Chicago raising money for their move and all this stuff. And when I was there, I met Susan Messing and met other people at the Annoyance, and they're like, "Oh, of course I know Jeff Quintana." So, and then he took pictures today, and I could tell he was at the Annoyance, and I was like, "Oh, wow, this is all like connecting together for me." So, it was really cool to see that. And I'm really getting more and more into improv.
That's cool. That's the neat stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just great to hang out with your sis and talk. And we were talking about why we like improv and voice acting and that kind of thing, which she's into. So
yeah. Well, and I'll tell you, she said it was great having you there. You were a really good person to have, and that you guys both were involved in improv. I thought that's pretty neat. That's pretty cool. She just got through doing a play called, what was it? It was about the witches. What was that?
Is it about Hillary Clinton?
No.
No, I don't know. A lot of people don't like her.
No, it was actually a musical that they started out in the Annoyance doing it originally, and then they kind of put it together and decided they could actually do this thing and take it, and they did it at the Fringe Festival.
Okay,
so it was good. Yeah.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
So lots of other stuff going on here. I wanted to read. We're doing sort of podcast-y stuff here since it's kind of a reset, since it's been over a month since we've been here. So I wanted to tell you about this. So I had this guy who's a stand-up comic in Miami named Faasil Malik, and he catches a lot of flack, actually. He's the only Muslim-American stand-up comic in South Florida, as far as I know. Yeah. And so we make jokes about that. He has jokes about that too. There's a lot of easy jokes like, "Hey, Faasil, I guess you were bombing tonight." Like stuff like that.
Oh no!
And we'll
man.
He makes that joke. So then we go back and forth. And we had him on Sex on Kava recently, and he after that he wanted to interview me for his website, his blog, which is ineedfaasil.com, and it's Fasil if you want to know. So he asked me all these questions, and I'm not going to read the interview on the air, but I did want to read this portion, which is from the final paragraph, because I mentioned this very podcast.
Oh, cool.
So I'm going to read it. This is what I said on Faasil Malik's interview. So I said, "I have another podcast, which I co-host with a Presbyterian minister. It's called Jesus Christ, That's Funny, JCTF for short, and it's sort of a comedic take on religion, relationships, and the meaning of life. My co-host, Pastor Dwayne Black, is sort of famous. He was in the news a lot last year, getting arrested for feeding the homeless in Fort Lauderdale. JCTF is probably the most personal media project I've ever done. I talk about my moral, spiritual, and relationship problems. Sometimes I forget there's a microphone in front of me and start really revealing my deepest, darkest secrets. Then Pastor Dwayne usually ends up telling me what I need to change to be a better person. Then I make a series of jokes. I really like working with Pastor Dwayne. He's obviously religious, and I'm not, but we end up finding a surprisingly large amount of common ground. And of course, there's a lot of irreverent humor, but I think that helps us connect with people. We've gotten great feedback from listeners so far. Listen on iTunes.
Oh, that was really nice.
Yeah.
That was really good.
So just wanted to promote that and just kind of read it. So yeah, I think it is. I think, I don't know, I want to get more in the habit of promoting this podcast. It's sort of weird because it's different than a lot of the other things that I do, but I think it's a lot of fun. And one thing I'll tell you is when I was at Podcast Movement, there's a couple of chances I got to, where I was in a room and they said, "Does anyone want to come up and mention their podcast?" You want to come up and just tell us about your podcast.
And how would you not want to do that?
But people are shy. Right, but I'm not shy.
No, not you.
So I raised my hand in a couple of these situations, and I walk up and I said, they're like, "Oh, well, what's your podcast?" I said, "Well, I have Sex on Kava and blah blah blah, and I'm a stand-up comic and blah blah blah." And then I said, "Oh, and I have another podcast, and I'm a stand-up comic. I have a podcast with a Presbyterian minister. It's called Jesus Christ, That's Funny." And people are like, I'm in. You know, like that's what more do I need to hear? You know, I want to listen to your podcast. So it's exciting.
Well, people do. When I tell them that we do this podcast together, they're always it takes them back about 4 or 5 notches. And if they're a Presbyterian minister or a minister out there, they always kind of, well, what do you mean, Jesus Christ? That's funny. And you start to try to explain to them that, well, first, this guy, Ethan, is that, his background is world religion, and he's a stand-up comic at the same time. So how can you not,
And then Jesus Christ is that funny.
Funny, that's...
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and by the way, speaking of how funny it is, we are going to be featured on Podbean's website.
Oh, really?
So Podbean is our host for this show, and they host podcasts, and we've had a good relationship with them, I think, for the past year or so. And so they do featured podcasts, and while I was there, I ran into one of the reps, and I said, "Hey, could you feature our podcast?" They said, "Sure, no problem." And it's coming up next week. Actually, we're going to be featured on their site. So when people go to podbean.com, they're going to see our logo out there on the first page. So that's kind of exciting, I think.
That is. This is the first I'm hearing about this. Really great.
I didn't tell you. I've been holding back on you, Pastor.
I appreciate that. That's good.
Right. So that happened. What else happened? We lost our news girl on Sex on Kava.
What happened? What was her name?
May Duran.
May.
That's in some ways this is sort of difficult to talk about.
Really?
Because, well, in some ways I wonder whether she would want me to talk about it. It's part of the reason. But here we are, I guess. I brought it up. Well, May, she was our second news girl on Sex on Kava, and her job as news girl is to read the news,
right,
and pick out a news story each week about like sex, weird sex stuff, basically, and read it on the air. But she's also like a co-host, really, because she's on not every show, but almost every show.
Right.
So she's kind of like the third host,
okay.
besides Rich Kennedy and me, and so she has a big part of the show. She also started writing some additional segments. So we would actually do like a segment called Guess the BS, and she would write extra news stories.
Right.
She would find two short news stories, and then one where she would write a fake short news story.
And you would have to guess which one was
BS. Yeah, which one was the fake one. So and we would gamble on it. We'd bet like $1 each. So it's exciting. It's kind of fun. So so that was always great. So she's contributing, in terms of writing and in terms of doing it. So and I think in terms of as a foil back and forth for Rich and I, she was really good, because it was kind of like we would get ridiculous and we would say all this crazy stuff, and she would kind of try to pull it back in and be like, "All right, guys, that's enough," right?
Right.
So I think it was a lot of fun, and we always liked having her on there. But she revealed to us on the air about 3 or 4 months ago that she happens to be a virgin. Okay. And so that was an interesting thing to say on a sex podcast, right? That now becomes kind of something that comes up frequently, right? Yeah, as you might imagine. I know, you're like, yeah, of course it would, right? So what happened was... Well, go ahead.
So she admits to you, these two guys...
She admits on the air.
That she was a virgin.
Right.
And she knows your background, and she knows the way you're going to take it, and she knows... Because she's been sitting this, so this is...
For a year. Yeah.
Okay. Really dangerous decision.
But she made the choice, and it came out.
No.
And so then it came up a few more times, and then I was like, well, this is part of her brand now.
Yeah.
on the show. And so then I'm like, well, I want to promote the show more in my stand-up act. So I actually wrote a joke where I referred to this in my stand-up. And then what happened was a stand-up comic heard me do the joke and then went up to her and said, "Oh, you're a virgin?"
Oh, no.
I just heard Ethan do a joke about it, and she flipped out. She was upset that I was talking about it. And I was like, "Well, we talking about it on the podcast." She's like, "This isn't the podcast. You're doing a joke on stage about me. Stop it." So I was like, "Okay." I was like, I'll take your name out of the joke. I don't even need to say who it is to do the joke.
Right. Yeah.
So I took it out. And then that week, this is a couple of weeks, 3 weeks ago or something like that now, I go on the air and I say, "Hey, so maybe I had a little conflict this week. She wanted me to take out this thing. She's as we all know, she's a virgin, blah, blah, blah," right? And she flipped out. And she was like, "I told you not to talk about this." I'm like, "Wait, you said on stage. Like, we've been talking about this for weeks." And she's like, "Well, no, you always bring it up." I brought it up once, and you, and I'm like, well, yeah, but it's going to come up. So we had I had a sense, I think ahead of time that she was starting to get sensitive about it.
Right.
We'd never had a conversation about it until this.
Yeah.
And our one conversation was kind of negative, like don't bring it up. But it wasn't about don't bring it up on the podcast. It was about
don't bring it up
on stage, right? Or at least that's what I understood. But she, I guess, understood it to be in a more global sense. And so so she freaked out. She walked out.
Yeah.
In the middle of the show, because we were making a series of jokes, once it started escalating, and so we're making more and more jokes.
What do you guys call that? There's a term for that. Because you've referred to this before, like you don't punch down. Punch down.
Yeah,
that's right. So
does this count as punching down?
I'm just asking.
Well, I don't think it does, because I would say it's basically like it's not punching down, because it's like she's a comic too.
Oh, okay.
So her take could be, hey, screw you guys, right? This is the way I live my life, and I look down on you,
right?
For the way you look. You know what I mean? Like she doesn't have to. It's like, to me, there's no value judgment on virgin, not virgin.
Right.
So it's not, you know what I mean? It's not like a bad thing, or it only is until she makes it into one.
Okay, so
now all of a sudden it becomes something that she's embarrassed about.
But everybody now wants to hear the joke without her naming it.
Oh, the joke I did on stage?
Yeah.
Well, it's in a lot of ways, you come see me do it on stage, But okay, well, the basic joke is basically just that I had sent her a dick pic.
Okay.
Right, which is true. I sent her a dick pic on the air, and a couple of other girls on the air, right? And her reaction was like, "Wow, that's pretty nice." And I was like, I felt really good. And then she revealed that she's a virgin, and I was like, "Wow, it kind of takes the wind out of my sails." It's like if I was playing the electric guitar, and someone came up to me and was like, "Wow, amazing guitar playing," but I don't know what music is.
I don't know.
So that's not as.
Oh man.
That's the base. That's the basic premise. I didn't really do it. I didn't really perform that joke. But
so have you apologized to her yet?
Well, that's why I wanted to bring it up to you, because all that, I say all that to explain. So then what happened was she actually walked out, and we had our guests. We had 3 other comics who happened to be on the podcast that week, and she's Haitian Dominican, and 2 of them are Haitian, and I don't know if that contributed to it, or 2 of them are Caribbean at least, and I don't know if that is what contributed to it, but she's got 2 other males there, and they're all kind of like. Maybe it felt like more like she was revealing something that she didn't want to be revealed in front of particular people who were on this. Even though the way I look at it, I'm like, well, you're revealing everything all the time because you're talking into a microphone, which being broadcast on the internet. But I think that was part of it. Like I think she felt like all of a sudden there's one female there, and then there's like 4 or 5 guys around, and we're all laughing about the fact that it's been revealed that Like
so if you were out there listening to this right now, what you need to do is pull over, get to the side, and email Ethan right now at Jesus Christ, that's funny, at gmail.com, and tell him that he's supposed to be apologizing to her, like immediately. just and send the same letter 15 times, okay? Just explode that account.
Well, if you want to hear the exactly what happened too, you can listen to Sex on Kava.
That's right. Exactly.
Episode 213, part 2.
I'm going to listen to it.
If you listen to it, you'll hear her walk out, then come back in, and then she actually gets to the point where she's like physically threatening me. It's like really, I was scared. I was like literally scared at a certain point, and then I kind of started backtracking a little bit.
Yeah.
Which felt wrong inside, because I was like, well, I shouldn't be backing down, because my position was, and this is where the question about the apology comes in. Like my position was, well, look, I'm producing this show.
Right, you are.
And as a producer, one of the things we need to start doing more is setting up where we are so far.
Exactly.
Right? So this is part of her character history.
Right.
Which it is, right? Like your Studio Sex podcast, your review of Never Had Sex, that is a very interesting fact that our listeners need to know.
Right.
And it's going to inform the way that they take the next thing that you say. And it's something, it's like, okay, we have to say that. And also, now this is, so that's going to come up. And so I have to do that job as producer. And then she came back and she was like, well, I want to control when that information goes out. She's like, we'll talk about that when I decide we can talk about that. And once again, as producer, my feeling is like, no way. Like that rule applies to no one. No one gets to have that kind of control, over what happens on a show that they're on, especially a show like this, which is all about just honest, raw talking.
Right.
You know, we've had people come on and talk about like their HIV status and, you know, being a teenage prostitute and like stuff like that. You know, I mean, it's like really get to really gritty stuff, and we make jokes and all that stuff, but it's really about the realness of being a human. And so if you come on and you try to sort of be fake, or if you reveal a fact about you, which is like cataclysmic, then you have to own it. You can't pretend like it didn't happen.
Right.
And especially when it turns into a big hullabaloo, you know, which it kind of became after this, really due to her reaction too. Obviously, it sort of fueled the fire. So, right, I'm like, this is my thing but at the same time, so we're on the air and I'm scared and I'm backing down and I'm like, well, maybe I should have talked to you more, you know, but I'm like, no, it had to happen. It had to go down this way.
Right.
And so I'm talking to my sponsor about this a few days later, right? Cut to, you know, she's quit.
Okay.
And I talked to a lot of people about this, and they were like, "Look, it's you know, it's kind of sad, but it just has to be this way, because if she can't handle the fact that this is going to come up, you know, because it's like, first of all, it's funny, and second of all, and she's a comedian, you know, she's got to be able to have a thicker skin than that, and she just has to recognize that this is part of her character. So the people I'm talking to, they're like, you're right in that sense, but at the same time, it's what I'm feeling inside is, well, you know, she and I are friends, or at least I thought we were. And she and I have a collegial relationship, as we're both stand-up comics. You know, we're both doing this radio show. So I'm not looking to say, okay, well, at the expense of, I have to play both roles. But how do I play both roles and be fair?
Right. I mean, well, it's a little bit Howard Sternish, you know. I mean,
yeah.
You know, I mean, it really is. It's a little bit of the shock type thing kind
Right.
of going on. But you know, and she did open the door, you know.
Yeah.
But maybe she didn't know what that door really was all about.
I think that's true. And she's like, I'm a very private person. I'm like, okay, well, you can't really, you know.
Yeah.
I use it. I think I said you can't put the genie back in the bottle, you know. And she's
Right.
like, oh, well, you're just justifying so you can do whatever you want to do. I'm like, okay, well, I have a sort of I think what she didn't understand, and what I failed to articulate,
right?
Because I was terrified in the moment of actually her like freaking out and doing something.
Did you
like,
think
to
she
hurt
was
me.
Physically gonna?
Yeah, she sort of said she was, and it was like it was scary. It was scary. It was actually scary. Like she was maybe gonna like start scratching me and stuff, which is that's what she sort of almost threatened to do. She's like, I walked out because I was about to start scratching your eyes out or scratching your face or something like that. Yeah, it was like. It was terrifying, and so I'm like backing down. I'm like, no, wait. But then I'm like inside. I'm like, no. I should have stood my ground and said, look,
right.
I you know, but it took me to be able to unpack all this stuff and really figure out how I felt about it. It actually took me having a conversation with my sponsor like a couple weeks later. You know, so I talked to him, and he's like, you owe her an amends. And I'm like, no, I don't, because I'm right. You know, that's my first reaction. Yeah. And I'm explaining to him about the two roles.
Right.
And what he said to me was, well, look, could you have done anything better? And I said, yeah, I guess what I really should have said is I should have taken her aside before the podcast started and said, look, you know, this just happened between the two of us this week. You're talking about how you don't want me to do this joke on stage, but it's going to come up on the podcast. It already has, and it's going to keep coming up because it's such a relevant fact to this podcast. So as the producer, I can't let it go. So basically, if you want to keep working together, you have to accept that. And you know, I wish that it wasn't such a stark choice, but it is.
Right.
So it's basically like it comes down to you can't keep doing the podcast unless you're willing to talk about this on the air, or at least acknowledge it on the air. It's you know what I mean? You can't just sort of control. You don't have control over the way this information is used.
Right.
At least not total control. So I should have. So basically, I should. So I was like, but I was like, that was going to hurt her too, because basically what that's saying is either we get to talk about this on the air, or you're fired.
Right. Yeah, you're basically saying that.
And that was what it came down to. As producer, I had to make that call. Forget about our friendship. Forget about that choice. I had to make that in my role as producer. And she, and I was afraid to do it. I was afraid of losing her. I was afraid of confronting her like that. And so the result was what happened. And I should have done it in the first place. I should have just said, look. So he's like, well, that's what you owe the amends for. You owe the amends. Not because there was no way to get out of the situation without hurting her, because it looks like there wasn't, but you owe the amends for not taking the more direct, honest route of saying, look, this is going to happen, whether you like it or not, or we can part ways.
Right.
And I don't know.
Or even another option of like listening to her and listening to because something must have brought her to say that, and then now trying to back out of it, or trying to say I don't want to talk about it, or it hurts me, or it offends me, but I mean somewhere along the line there has to be a balance between. I mean, seems like producers justifying that I don't have to treat you as the friend that you are. And I don't know. There's a sensitivity that sometimes people say things that you never want to bring back up because you know that they were just too sensitive, and I think also that the people in recovery have an issue with ownership and control, that they don't give it up very easily.
Yeah, so you're saying I'm one of those people.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying that it seems to me
well, why else
there
would you
are
bring it
those
up?
people.
Why else would you bring it up?
I just see it here, I just see it. That's all.
But you're saying that, but I don't understand exactly the point about sensitivity. Like,
well, I think that if I felt like, okay, this is going to come back up a number of times here, how do we deal with it? Do we deal with it? Maybe do we walk into it a different way? Do we talk about it in a different way than just a punch down joke?
Right.
Or do we bring it up and say, hey, listen, this is really a great part of you, so you need to expound on it and tell us.
And I think and I wanted her to do that.
Yeah.
I was kind of waiting for her to jump out and take ownership of it, which I kind of thought she would.
She sounded pretty hurt and angry.
But she didn't. Yeah, she wasn't able to do it. And
what does she look like? I'm trying to remember. I've seen pictures of her.
Like?
Yeah.
She's a very beautiful young Haitian Dominican girl. I don't know.
She has short hair, or
she's got like longer hair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There just was a girl standing out by your car earlier when you came in, and I wasn't sure if that was her. She had a knife in her hand.
Oh, no, that was her then.
That was her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something about tires. I don't know what it was. Drive this home. No.
Great. Yeah. No, I actually after the show, people after that episode, like Rich was like, "Do you need like an escort after your car tonight?" And you know what was funny too was that same night in part one of that episode 213, part one, we were talking about respect, and I was like, I don't understand the concept of respect.
Wait. Because you guys were talking about respect, and you.
Then I did this. So like, and here's the context that came up in. This is what we just sort of dissect this episode. And I was thinking about you in the context of this too, because I'd like to know what your. Well, I think I know what your thought will be, but here we go. So that same episode, we had this comedian on, Kevin Taylor, and he was talking. He was like, basically, he was positing a scenario like, what if you're walking on the street and like someone spits in your face, And I was like, I would just like wipe the spit off and keep walking, or like maybe, like just be like, that was a strange thing for that person to do. And they were like, and he and Artis Lecter and Philip Ismay, so these three guys, they were all like, what? Like, what the F? Like, I can't believe that. Like, they're like calling me names and stuff. And like, and I was like, no, I don't understand. Like, why would I escalate that situation? I would, and they're like, well, what if you're with a girl? And Meme brought that up actually. She's like, what if you're with your woman and walking on the street, and then she does it, she's gonna think you can't protect her. And I'm like, what? Like, if I was walking on the street and some guy had spit on my face and started insulting me, I'd just be like, whoa, stop that, and then I'd keep walking. I'm like, because if I get into a fight with the person, then that's not going to solve anything.
Well, the guy's probably mentally ill.
I was like, I'm thinking this human unit is malfunctioning. I'm not going to add fuel to the fire. And then I would think that the woman I was with would respect me.
Right.
And then our junior producer, Jackie, who she steps in the mic, she's like, I would totally respect Ethan if he did that. And I'm like, yeah. And so would most women I've ever dated. That was not an answer that was acceptable to those three guys, and Meme either. You know? And then it was like, well, they were, and Artis is explaining this, and he was sort of saying like, well, it's because they're black, all three of these guys, and they're Caribbean, and he's like, well, you know, when you're not respected your whole life, then respect becomes more of a commodity. He's like, you don't, Ethan, you're white. You don't have to like ever worry about respect.
Yeah.
It's just you automatically have it. And I was like, that's a good point. That's true. But at the same time, for me, the moral choice, the only choice there is to not, you know, I'm a pacifist.
Yeah.
So what am I going to react with violence? I'm like, this person, and then I'm like, I don't, because I was just like, we're talking past each other, because I'm like, respect is just a made up thing. It's not a real thing.
Right.
Like, it literally doesn't matter. I mean, it matters if you're in prison or something like that, right? And there's like everyone's watching you know, or something like that. But like, I'm just walking down the street, you know, I want to be able to get up and do comedy the next day.
Right.
You know, I have things to do. I have obligations to people. I can't just get into fistfights, you know, because I feel like my feelings are hurt. And so then I can, justify like, well, he hurt my respect, so I have to lash out at him and teach him a lesson. Like, I can't imagine myself being that person. I couldn't even think my way into it. So it was this whole thing where I was like, I don't get respect. I don't understand. Not like Rodney Dangerfield, like, hey, I got no respect.
Yeah.
No, I don't understand respect. I don't understand what it even really is.
Well, this whole idea of redemptive violence is not, and we've been, people have been doing this for years and years and years. The whole idea of, biblically, you look at, Samson. The whole story starts out with, him having a riddle with his which will be his wife's brothers, and it starts there, and it just escalates until they're destroying, and there's environmental destruction and economic destruction. Just this idea of redemptive violence, that if you hurt me, then I hurt you, and I hurt you a little bit more, and it stops there. Well, it does never stop there. If I hurt you, then you're going to hurt me more. And it just escalates up, and it doesn't.
Right.
So where does it stop when somebody turns the other cheek and somebody goes, you know what?
Yeah.
This person's, not mentally there, and I'm just going to keep going.
The concept of vendetta.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And then eventually, like, all the males are dead in a society. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an eye for an eye. That whole idea of was basically to stop that type of thing of going, you hurt me, I'll take a hand. You take a hand, I'll take a human being.
Right.
And it doesn't. It's never worked. It's never ever worked. And so you have people who still think it does.
Well, it might work in some certain sense in like a desert culture where there's very scarce resources and there are particular rules of engagement, and you know what I mean? I don't know. I'm just saying, like, it's possible it could be an adaptive strategy for a particular
thousands
group.
and thousands of years ago, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
so,
well,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah.
Sometimes it seems like things haven't progressed in
I don't think it has.
certain parts of the world, so maybe it still works in some places. But to me, walking down the street in Fort Lauderdale, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
For sure. So I can only speak to my own experience, I guess, there.
Right.
And I would say, like, no way. Like, turn the other cheek is always the right answer.
Right.
It's not only morally the right answer, it's just common sense. It's like, to me, it's like stupid. It would be stupid for me to get drawn into something like that. It's like, wow, here's a whole bunch of things that I don't want to do. It's like I look at the two sides of the scale, right? I'm like, on one side of the scale, I have to wipe the spit off my face. On the other side of the scale, it's like, well, I might end up in jail, or I might hurt someone and have that on my conscience, or have someone hurt me,
right?
Or if someone else gets involved, gets hurt. Like, I don't, like, to me, there's no respect on any side of that scale. No, for me, so I don't, like, my ego isn't bound up with whether someone can spit on my face and get away with it. Right. My ego is bound up with, how many women I can hook up. No, other things for sure. Not that.
Right.
So
no, I was at a homeless meeting in Washington D.C. that they were honoring the lives of many of the homeless people who had died that year, and one of the guys who I'd run into, a homeless guy, we talked, and then he came back and he started talking to me, and he started getting in my face and getting really angry. Right. And I kept trying to de-escalate it by giving him some space and not arguing with him, but like, go ahead and talk. And finally, some of his friends came, and kind of pulled him aside, and said, you need to stop doing this. But it could have been very easy to gotten back into his face when what he was saying to me. But what would it have done? Nothing. He was not sane. He had all sorts of issues going on in
Right.
his life, and it wasn't doing what I'm about. Yeah.
You're a man of the cloth, also. It's sort of like really funny if you started getting into fist fights, or like.
Wouldn't that be so wrong?
Yeah, I think that would be strange. Maybe like a comic book, like superhero or something, like some vigilante preacher. Yeah,
He's out there beating them up.
Right. Yeah.
That's
I can imagine like a Jesuit, like smacking someone around, maybe.
Catholic priest. They do.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking about how we need to keep these in shorter amounts of time, so we should wrap this episode up. I know we have some more things to get to, but let's get to that
later.
In the next one, yeah. And it looks like I'm gonna have to call Maymay up on the phone,
and I think we should do it right on the air.
Well, that's a terrible idea.
I think that's a great idea.
She already doesn't want to be on the air. She might even be upset that I brought it up here, but I don't know.
But I think you worked through it,
I hope so, and I do. I think what was hard for me about the situation was I felt like, so it's like I'm like, well, Maymay, like I put myself out there for Maymay in a number of situations, and I always felt like it was hard for her to see that I liked her or to admit that you know what I mean? Hard for her to kind of like, so it'd be like, I would, okay, I'll drive, I'll pick you up, I'll drive you here, I'll help you with stuff, help her with stuff with her car and like just different things, but, and then there would be other times where, and I'm like, so we're closer, like she trusts me enough to ask me for help, and then I'm helping her out. I'm like, okay, this is great. But then there's other times where it would be like, she expected me to be somewhere and I wasn't there. And even though she had never asked me to be there, and then she would like resent it, so it's just like, there were these just moments where we kind of had a lot of peaks and valleys, in the relationship. And I was always, I've always been sort of, I always liked Maymay a lot, but I've also always felt like there was a sense in which it was just really hard for her to connect all the way.
And it may have been, yeah.
And so then this was like, wow, this is like really like a serious disconnection here, So
So I can't wait to hear.
Not what I was going for,
What your conversation with her will be like. That will be great.
Well, I have to do it, I have to talk to her if she's willing. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I guess I'll have to report back maybe in a couple weeks, and we'll see. We'll see what happens.
That'll be really good. Yeah.
Update. All right. Well, thanks a lot for listening.
Yep.
To Jesus Christ, That's Funny.
Yeah, because I really want to get to the next section where we talk about politics and we talk about the gospel of Jesus, and that it is political, but it is not partisan.
Okay, so that's coming up in our next episode.
Yep.
In the meantime, you can look us up on iTunes.
Yes.
Just look up Jesus Christ, That's Funny, and please give us a review and a 5-star rating.
Sounds great.
You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat at Ethan Is Not Funny. And I have a show coming up this Tuesday, August 9th at the 33rd Street Wine Bar in Fort Lauderdale. That's going to be a great show. It's at 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock? Okay.
You gotta there's a 2-drink minimum, but they have amazing wine there, which I won't be drinking, obviously. But they have amazing wine there. I know it was voted like best wine bar in Fort Lauderdale a couple years ago. It's like a really cool little spot. And the headliner is John Gregory, and he's just an amazing Miami comic. If you've never seen him, like you gotta come out to this show and check him out. We've also got a couple other people supporting the show, like Eric Rosenblum, Julie Baez, and Leon Arp. So it's going to be a
really fun show. I will be there. I will be there,
you
man.
always say this, but
I know, but I really that's the day I can do it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll expect to see you there.
That'd be good.
So that's exciting. And what about you, Pastor? Where can people get a hold of you?
You can get a hold of me at the Sanctuary Church, ftl.org. That's our website. Or you can email me at Dwayne at the Sanctuary Church, ftl.org.
All right, good stuff. All right, well, thanks for listening, and